Hello children, I welcome you to the revision video of half yearly. Today we shall be discussing in brief the chapters and then we shall try to solve certain questions. So let's get started. The first chapter that we have is ruling the rural areas of history. In this chapter, so far we have discussed about the different revenue systems. The first was Ijardari system, which was introduced by Warren Hastings, the Governor General. Here, whosoever claimed that he would be able to get maximum revenue was given the zamindari right for 5 years. However, the highest bidders could not fetch the amount as promised by them. They were the fake promises which were made just to get the zamindari rights, and later they could not fulfill those targets. Then the second system which was introduced was permanent settlement system or zamindari system. It was introduced by Lord Cornwallis. This system was mainly introduced in Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Here the zamindars were given rights for their entire life, and rather it was hereditary in nature. After they died, it was given to their children, right? But then again, there were certain problems with the system. The problems that were there with this system were that the zamindars were, most of the time they were not able to fetch the revenue because the rate of revenue was really high. The peasants could not pay the revenue to the zamindars, and zamindars could not hand it over to the company on a specified date before sunset. They had to hand it over to the company on a specified date before sunset. This is known as sunset law. They were not able to give it, and hence the zamindari rights were snatched away from them and given to some other zamindar. Now, the Britishers thought that the zamindars had to retain their zamindari rights, and hence they would do something, right? They would do something for the they would do something for the development of agricultural fields, because they had to hand over the revenue to the company. So to get revenue from the peasants, they would do something to improve the land, but they did nothing at all. Rather, they shifted to the cities. They were called absentee landlords, and they came to the villages just to collect revenue, right? And then, okay, but here in this system the rate of revenue was fixed. It was not to be increased in future. There was a time when the peasants were able to generate huge revenue. Then the company got the fixed share and the profits were enjoyed by the zamindars. In this system, the zamindars were merciless most of the times, and the peasants were forced to borrow money from the money lenders or the zamindars, and ultimately the peasants lost their land to the zamindars or the money lenders. Second system, if I talk of, it is Ryotwari system. It was introduced by Thomas Munro. It is also known as Munro settlement. Under this system, the revenue was collected directly from the Ryot. Ryot means the peasant. There was no middleman involved. And this system was mainly there in western and southern India, but then again the system was not up to the mark because the rate of revenue was really high. And then the next system was Mehelwari settlement, which was introduced by an officer called Holt Mackenzie. In this system, the village headman used to collect the revenue, thinking that the village headman would do something to keep the village intact. He would be merciful, and plus there is no outsider involved. It is just the village headman there, so there is no outsider, so the peasants would be comfortable. But then again the rate of revenue was really high. Though there was no outsider or Dikku involved, but then the rate of revenue was really high and the peasants were unhappy. And it was practiced in Punjab. Actually, Mahel means village. So there was a village headman to collect the revenue in Mehelwari system. All the three settlements were very, very hazardous because the peasants were forced to borrow money from the money lenders, right? The rate of revenue was really high. they were forced to borrow money from the money lenders, they lost their land, sometimes they themselves abandoned their land and they went off to, they could not pay the rate of revenue, the rate of interest. So the conditions were very, very bad and agriculture remained stagnant. There was no development in the field of agriculture. Now, if I talk of commercialization of crops, the farmers were forced to grow the crops like jute, cotton, sugar, indigo, because they were in great demand in Europe. Now, the farmers could not fill in their belly with these crops. So, commercialization of crops made the farmers impoverished, they starved to death, and besides this, they sold off all their produce, they sold off all their produce to the East India Company at a very low price, right? Then if I talk of indigo, farmers were forced to grow indigo on their fertile lands. Indigo is very, very hazardous. It leads to soil infertility. It deteriorates the soil fertility. So it was very, very harmful, right, to grow the crops, to grow indigo. But then the farmers were forced to grow indigo. There were two systems of indigo cultivation. One was Ryot and the other was Nij. Under Ryot settlement, the farmers were forced to grow indigo on their own piece of land. They were given loans, and to repay their loans, they had to sell the indigo to the European planters at very cheap prices. The second was Nij cultivation. Nij cultivation was when the European planters themselves bought or rented a piece of land and they hired the Indian peasants to grow indigo on it. Niche cultivation was not very successful because the European planters had to find piece of land or buy piece of land. Then the Indian planters were not, the Indian peasants were not ready to work for them. So niche cultivation wasn't very successful. And in Bengal, the peasants were very, very unhappy due to indigo cultivation, and then they attacked the indigo factories. Neel Darpan is a book, right, in which The Mirror of Indigo, it is a Bengali play by Deenbandhu Mitra, in which he had mentioned how the planters in Bengal exploited people and how unhappy the peasants were. The peasants, the women, the upper class, the Bengali upper class, they all attacked the indigo factories, and then an indigo commission was set up, and finally the indigo planters were forced to shift to Bihar. Now they shifted to Champaran, Bihar. There also they exploited the poor peasants. Finally they found synthetic indigo in Germany. Finally they found synthetic indigo, and it was actually developed by Germany, the synthetic indigo. And then after developing synthetic indigo, they wanted farmers to give them compensation because they were releasing them from the irksome system of growing indigo. See, they did not want the farmers to grow indigo because they developed synthetic indigo, and the farmers should pay them money. This was actually, senseless. It's like going to the shop and telling the shopkeeper, I'm not buying product from your shop, and so you give me money. Why will the shopkeeper pay you money? At this point, Mahatma Gandhi came to the rescue and he helped the peasants to not to pay the compensation, and he helped the peasants. So Mahatma Gandhi's role was very important in Champaran. You will study in detail in the higher classes about this. Now the next chapter that we have is, we have the next chapter as natural resources, land, soil and water. Now land, if I discuss the natural resources, the free gifts of nature, land. Land is a finite resource, and land is needed for various purposes. It is needed for agriculture, it is needed for grazing, it is needed for so many purposes, right? But the land is limited with us. So we need to use the land very, very judiciously. We need to be very, very judicious in our use of land, right? Land use should be very, very proper. Now, land is not even everywhere. Somewhere there are mountains, right? High altitude regions. They have their own beauty, scenic beauty. There are glaciers which are the source of river water. They have medicines, herbs, spices there, wood there. Then we have plateaus, the raised tablelands, right? Plateaus are the storehouse of minerals. We have plains, the low-lying areas, fertile regions. The low-lying fertile regions, we live in plains, so comfortable, easy to build infrastructure, roads, etc. Plains are the granaries. Now we need to conserve the resources. How can we conserve the resources? Afforestation, right? Proper planning is necessary. Should the agricultural land be used to construct an industry? Not at all, right? It is unwise. Why to use fertile land to set up an industry? Why? Right. Besides this, check overgrazing, check soil erosion, plant trees, be very scientific in your approach. Now, prevent landsliding. Landsliding is when there is mass movement of land, rocks, and debris due to floods, famines, etc. Now, we can mitigate this by afforestation. We can mitigate this by having proper drainage system, right? And we need to make retention walls. The retention walls will not allow water to come down, and with water the land will also not come down, it will stop, right? Now next, land is discussed. Now soil, when the rocks break by the process of weathering, it leads to the formation of soil, right? Rocks break due to heat of the sun, due to certain chemicals which are released by the organisms, due to trees, the roots of the trees, they penetrate through the rocks and break the rocks, and when the rocks break due to weathering, it leads to the formation of soil. Now soil is made from the rock, so of course it depends upon the rock. If the rock is rich in say magnesium, then the soil will also be rich in magnesium. Then of course the relief features play a very important role in the soil formation. If it's very hot and humid, then different kinds of soils would be there, right? Climatic conditions play a very important role. The number of organisms which are there in the soil. Now the more the number of organisms, the more would be humus. Humus is the organic matter, the dead and decaying matter in the soil. And the more the humus, the better the soil is, the more fertile the soil is, the darker the soil is. And of course time period plays a very important role in case of soil formation. Now soil has different layers, and those layers together form, the horizontal layers together form soil profile. We have topsoil, which is the most fertile soil, right? It is known as A horizon. Then we have subsoil, in which there is sand, silt, clay, pebbles. Then we have horizon C, and this horizon C has larger rock fragments. See, topsoil doesn't have rock fragments, subsoil has little of rock fragments, and this horizon C has bigger rock fragments, and bedrock or horizon D has such solid unweathered rock. Now there are different soils found in India. Alluvial soil, which is the most fertile soil formed by the sediments brought by the rivers. Then we have black soil. Black soil is also known as cotton soil. It is formed in Gujarat, Rajasthan, and black soil is known as cotton soil because it is best for growing cotton. Black soil has a lot of clay content. See, every soil has sand, silt and clay. Black soil has a lot of clay content, and due to a lot of clay content, the black soil is very, very sticky in nature, right? So naturally it develops cracks so that it can breathe in. And black soil is has more of clay content. Then red soil, of course it is red because it contains iron. It is found in southern and eastern India, and it is not very fertile. You need to make it fertile by adding on fertilizers. Laterite soil, laterite soil is used for making red bricks, and laterite soil is found in the areas where there is excess of rainfall and very high temperature. Due to excessive rainfall, the topsoil gets eroded away. Or due to excessive rainfall, what happens? The nutrients of the topsoil wash down. This is known as leaching. What is this known as? Leaching. Mountain soil is of course found in mountainous areas. The soil is fertile, but then it gets eroded, denuded due to snow. And desert soil is found in desert areas. It has more of sand content. It cannot absorb. Water. It is highly infertile. Now, the soil gets eroded because there are no trees to bind the soil particles together, so it gets eroded by wind, water, etc. Soil conservation. How can we conserve soil? By afforestation, checking overgrazing. You need to do crop rotation. Right after every few crops, grow a leguminous crop. It will help to enrich the soil fertility. The rhizobium bacteria will fix in nitrogen. Contour plowing, make contours, the lines, parallel lines, right? Then terrace farming, it is done in high slopes. Strip cropping, grow grasses in between. The grasses will check the flow of wind and water. Cover cropping, never leave the land, land without trees. Shelter belts. Now shelter belts means around the farm have the trees, so that the trees check the flow of wind and water. Dams, create dams. The walls would check the flow of water. Now if I talk of water, about 71% of the earth is covered with water. However, the amount of fresh water is really less. Yes, so we need to conserve water. Rain water is the purest form of water, but then there is scarcity of water because the amount of fresh water is very less. There is water everywhere, but then there is no water to drink because the amount of fresh water is really less. Now, dams are known as temples of modern India. Dams are suggested as a temples of modern India by Jawaharlal Nehru because dams can help to produce electricity, right? Dams can help to produce electricity, and besides this, dams control flood. Dams are tourist attraction. We can conserve water resources by planting trees, by practicing rainwater harvesting, sprinkler irrigation, drip irrigation, etc. Go. Now, let's discuss natural vegetation and wildlife, the next chapter, very very quickly. Natural vegetation and wildlife. Let's get started. So, natural vegetation and wildlife, forests are important because they provide us oxygen, they provide us furniture, they provide us, variety of raw material. Now, different types of plants and animals are found in different areas. This is known as biome. Now, if I talk of tropical evergreen forests, they are found in the areas which are close to the equator. That means high temperature and heavy rainfall. Due to heavy rainfall, the trees are so dense and they develop canopy above, right? And hardest wood is found here, like rubber, ebony, rosewood. Temperate evergreen, they are found away from the equator, but then again in the areas which receive high rainfall and high temperature. And example, China, we have this temperate evergreen forest. Walnut is a tree which is grown there. Oak. Deciduous forest, the trees shed all their leaves in one season, that is autumn. Deciduous forests are found in large number in India. Now, coniferous forests, they are found in cold areas. These trees are tall, evergreen, and their leaves are needle shaped. They slide off snow. They are used to make soft wood material like furniture, matchstick, etc. Grasslands. Grasslands are also known as savanna. Grasslands means the grasses are far away from each other. Where are the grasses? The grasses are far away from each other, so it is known as savanna. What is it known as? It is known as savanna. The grasses are far away from each other. And the grasses are far away from each other, and these tropical grasslands are mainly found near these tropical evergreen forests. And the grasses are far away from each other, and they are known as savannas. Then we have temperate grasslands. See, tropical grasslands are found in hot areas. Temperate grasslands are found in cold areas. Like in Canada, we have temperate grassland. The grasses are there, but in cold areas. Like prairies of North America. This is important. Prairies of North America. The grasses in North America, it's a cold region. They are called prairies there. Steppes in Eurasia. Downs in Australia. Pampas in South America, and velds in South Africa. We have Forest Research Institute in Dehradun. Then if I talk of coniferous forests, I forgot to tell you that they are also known as taiga. And if I talk of tundra vegetation, higher in the altitude you cannot find long trees. You find shrubs there, mosses and lichens there. Desert, in desert we find cactus, we find dates, right? Then we need to conserve natural vegetation. Wildlife, different areas are known for different kinds of animals. They are indigenous for that place and exotic for the other place. It means they're exclusively found there. For example, Australia is known for kangaroo, which is a marsupial animal. That means it keeps its all offspring in its pouch so that the malnourished baby kangaroo becomes healthy. So marsupial animals keep their undernourished baby in the pouch so that they develop stronger. Emu is a flightless bird found there. Jackass is found there. Right, it is known as kookaburra. Then Africa is known for animals. Australia I have just discussed. And then South America is the richest continent in terms of wildlife. If I talk of monkeys, pumas, jaguars. Then if I talk of Europe, it is known for sheep, wolves, foxes, rabbits and whatnot. Even Antarctica has those beautiful penguins, right? Albatross. We need to conserve wildlife. 4th December is celebrated as Wildlife Day. CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora and Fauna. It's given on page number 144. It has banned the use of materials obtained from the animals, because to obtain those materials we harm the animals. For example, to obtain the tusk of elephant, we harm the elephant. Now let's discuss secularism very quickly. Secularism in India. If I talk of secularism in India, secularism means say when there is no official religion, every one is allowed to follow their own religion, is his or own religion. The government doesn't compel at any point to follow this religion or follow that religion. That is called secularism. Secularism is so very necessary to ensure there is peace and harmony in the country, so that the government, secularism is necessary so that we can accommodate so much of diversity of the country. This is so very necessary that we have a secular approach. It is necessary for the democratic system, and it is the government's responsibility to ensure that everyone enjoys freedom of religion, right? Our beauty is our diversity, and secularism and non-interference of the government in religious practices and protection of all the religions can only help to maintain peace, prosperity and harmony in the country, and to keep the country intact, united, right? So secularism gives equal importance to all religions. So this is so good. And to ensure secularism, government, it checks that one group doesn't try to dominate the other group, right? One religious group. Now the members of say one religion do not dictate their own the members of their own community, right? Say there are Hindus, the higher caste Hindus are dominating the lower caste Hindus. No, this is wrong. The priests are preaching something wrong. No, the people of their own community should not dictate the other people that do this. This is what our religion says. Do that. This is what our religion says. No, let everybody have their own faith. This is important, and the state, of course, doesn't force somebody to follow this religion or follow that religion. India and USA both are secular countries. The difference is that in USA, government doesn't interfere in the religious practices and religion doesn't discuss politics. However, in India, the Indian government can interfere in the religious practices if the religious practices, if the religious practices say if the religious practices do something wrong in the name of religion. For example, in the name of religion, you tell somebody that sacrifice your own life, right? Or you tell in the name of religion that that in the name of religion you practice untouchability. In the name of religion, people used to restrict the lower caste from entering the temples. So in the name of religion, you cannot do something wrong. If you are doing something wrong in the name of religion, that my religion says this, say the religion says that polygamy is allowed, then the government will interfere and say no, polygamy is illegal. You are telling this in the name of religion, but then this is wrong. This is morally wrong, or this is fundamentally wrong. This is wrong as per our constitution, and our constitution is above everything. This is wrong as per human rights, as per the rights of a woman. Now, if I discuss of the need of a parliament, the parliament is the highest law-making body in the country, right? Parliament is the supreme law-making body. We have two houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Parliament is the highest law-making body. We have two houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So it is known as bicameral legislature. Now Lok Sabha is the lower house, Rajya Sabha is the upper house. But then Lok Sabha, for the name's sake, it is lower house. It is more powerful than Rajya Sabha because it has more strength of members. Lok Sabha members are directly elected by the people. They are elected for 5 years, but Rajya Sabha members are elected for 6 years. But then Lok Sabha members have more control over the money bill, right? Rajya Sabha members do not have any control over the money bill. Lok Sabha members, they can, if they pass no confidence motion, that means they have no confidence in the Prime Minister, then the Prime Minister has to resign. Rajya Sabha cannot do this. Rajya Sabha cannot pass the no confidence motion. Then, so no confidence motion originates in Lok Sabha, money bill originates in Lok Sabha, two important bills originate in Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha has more strength, the members are directly elected by the people, right? And the Lok Sabha members are known as member of Legislative Assembly. The Rajya Sabha members are known as member of Legislative Council, or they are known as member of Parliament. Lok Sabha members are elected for 5 years. Rajya Sabha members are elected for 6 years. Lok Sabha members can be removed before time by passing no confidence motion. So see, if no confidence motion is passed, then the entire Lok Sabha resigns. If the Lok Sabha passes no confidence motion, they all have to resign. Rajya Sabha, they retire after every 6 years. They cannot be removed before 6 years, and they are important people from the field of art, literature, music, etc. Lok Sabha members are elected by us, right? From each constituency, we choose a member for Lok Sabha. But then the Rajya Sabha members are elected by the president. They are elected by the, by the members of Lok Sabha only. So they are indirectly elected. Now you need to understand this, that in Lok Sabha we have the speaker. In Rajya Sabha we have the chairman, right? They both see that the discussions are going on very peacefully. Now, who is the chairman of Rajya Sabha? This is important. Vice President is the chairman of Rajya Sabha, right? And who is the Vice President? Who takes position if the President is not there. Now for Lok Sabha, as I discussed, that the age is 25 years, Rajya Sabha 30 years, for President the age is 35 years. President is also elected for 5 years. President is elected by the members of Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Vidhan Sabha and Vidhan Parishad. President is the commander of the army. President signs all the treaties. When the President signs a bill, the bill becomes law. President can declare war. President can pass ordinance. That means if a very quick decision is needed, then no meeting is done and President immediately passes a law that is called ordinance. It is valid for 6 months. Now, if the President is absent or he dies, then the Vice President takes charge, who is already the chairman of Rajya Sabha, and he is the ex officio chairman. Ex officio means Since you are the vice president of the country, so automatically you become the chairman of Rajya Sabha. Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of Planning Commission or Niti Aayog. Now, in the parliament, there are members from the opposition party. They criticize the party, the ruling party, so they keep a check on the ruling party. There's a question hour, the first hour of every sitting, where they ask questions to the cabinet ministers. There are three kinds of ministers: cabinet ministers, ministers of state, and deputy ministers. They all are council of ministers. The three: cabinet ministers, ministers of state, and deputy ministers. The opposition asks them questions, and they all have to answer. And they cannot speak against their own party or against their own leader, against their own members. So it is their collective responsibility that they have to answer the questions. And after the question hour, we have the 0 hour where all the discussions take place. The Prime Minister asks them questions. The Prime Minister appoints the Council of Ministers, but on the advice of the President. Achha, the President can also appoint the judges of Supreme Court, High Court, the Chief Justice of India. President is also very important. In case of coalition government, the President decides who will be the Prime Minister. Now, if I talk of Parliament, the Lok Sabha keeps a check on the money bill and the government. Now, there are three kinds of lists which are there: concurrent list, central list, and state list. In case of central list, all the decisions are taken by the central government. In case of state list includes the matters in which only state government can take decision. See, central list includes the matters in which only central government can make decision. For example, demonetization, currency, etc. State list includes the matters only in which state government can make decisions. For example, state government can make decision about agriculture, about police, irrigation. And concurrent list includes the matters in which both the central and the state government can make decision. For example, marriage, divorce, right, and education. But then in concurrent list, if the central and the state government are of different opinion, then whatever central government says, that is final. Then people in the parliament, they make decisions, right, and but then there are certain bills which remain pending for years. For example, there's a bill that seats should be reserved for women in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, but then the bill is pending. The members of parliament are not passing the bill because they're afraid once the seats are reserved for women, then their chance of getting elected would be less. So with this, I wind up the explanation part. Now let's see how much we know. Let's see this FIBs and things, and let's see how much we know. The Forest Research Institute is in, what is the place? Dehradun. Dash are called temples of India, dams, or the multi-purpose projects. Secularism promotes peace in the country, harmony in the country. Dash is a flightless bird in Australia. Tell me. It is emu. Now, similarly, I can ask you, what is impeachment? Impeachment is the removal of the king, the removal of the president, or the removal of impeachment is the complex process of the removal of the president, the Chief Justice of India, the judges of High Court and Supreme Court. That is called impeachment. Now, if I ask you this way, what is the minimum age to become the member of Legislative Assembly? It is MLA, that is 25 years, Legislative Council 30 years, to become the President 35 years. If you are the Vice President of the country, you automatically become the Chairman of Rajya Sabha. If you are the Prime Minister of the country, you automatically become you are the ex officio officer of this Planning Commission or Niti Aayog. If you are the President of India, you automatically become President of India, automatically becomes the Commander of Army, right? So this is how you should be clear with the concept to attempt the paper and write the answers as per the number of marks it carries. It's a 2-marker answer, write at least 5-6 lines. If it's a 3-marker answer, we expect 10-15 lines for the same. And with this I wind up and request all of you to learn the chapters, understand them properly. Thank you and have a great day ahead. All the best.